As you reach into your 40s, most of you are over halfway in your working careers and you're starting to think about, when can I actually retire? And maybe you're thinking, can I retire in my 50s? Can I retire in my 60s? Do I have to work all the way to my 70s in order to retire and not be able to run out of money? This is the final part of our 3-video series talking about saving in your 20s, 30s, and finally your 40s. In this video, we're going to look about saving in your 40s and what are some tips and tricks in order to save and to know how much do I need to save in order to eventually retire. Now, depending on your situation, you may be in the most expensive stage of your life. Your expenses are through the roof, you're spending a ton of money, and there's varying factors depending on this. If it's kids starting to grow up, going out of the house, but they're still dependent on you, whether you still have a mortgage, whether you're just making more income and therefore you're spending more as it is. But this stage of life is typically more expensive than earlier on in life. But also, it is the time of life when you're starting to earn more. You're hitting kind of that peak time of your career where you're having a huge amount of income, and trying to be able to save accordingly is very important. Now, for those of you who have been watching our video series and maybe are in your 40s and have taken the practical steps that we outlined in your 20s and 30s, you might be able to reach these goals a bit sooner than those who are just starting right now. And you're going to be well ahead of the curve because most people don't think of this. They think of their retirement kind of 10 to 15 years out. If you've done this before, you're kind of already allowing compound interest to play an effect, and you're not going to have to be able to save as much because you already did it early on in life. Now we're going to hop into the software and just look at some simple example of saving in your 40s, but then more of a complicated or more complex example looking at our software saving in your 40s and what that looks like for projected income in retirement and all of that. But before I hop into that, I just want to say, if you're liking this content here, please like and subscribe to our channel. And if you know anyone that can benefit from this financial advice, please just share it to them. We are more than happy to be able to provide advice to Canadians over the world. We do it so that you can get educated about your finances and that you can grow your wealth over time. It is one of those things in our industry that is not necessarily talked about enough, and we want to make sure that everyone makes an informed decision when it comes to your finances. So if you like this content, make sure to like and subscribe. Saving in your 40s, you gotta look back at some of the things in your 20s and 30s that maybe you have been doing or you haven't been doing, but we're gonna do a quick recap on the previous 2 videos of saving in your 20s and 30s. So saving in your 20s, you're kind of just kickstarting your career and making sure that you're not easily influenced by those around you. Making unnecessary purchases is a big thing, especially in today's day and age. So really focusing on that, saving in your 20s. Also, being able to allocate a percentage of your income, whether that's 10, 15, 20%, towards some sort of saving or investment account. Also establishing an emergency fund, setting up automatic investing. All these things in your 20s is going to pay off, and hopefully you're in your 40s and you've already done that and you're well ahead of the game. Moving on to saving in your 30s is a little bit different because there's multiple different factors that come into play here, whether it be kids, marriage, mortgage. There's a different stage of life and different things to kind of look at when saving in your 30s. Trying to have a good credit score is important, building up that credit, but also having no bad debt. Your mortgage is totally fine. Most people have a mortgage around that age. That is considered good debts. It's going to grow over time. Hopefully your real estate or your property grows over time. But having bad debt, 0 of it, credit card debt, any type of high interest bearing debt. And then just being able to maintain that 15% or 10% of your paycheck going towards investment, just like you were doing in your 20s, but making that automatic, consistent withdrawal to your investment accounts. Now let's transition to saving in your 40s and what that kind of means. Now, most people say that in your 40s, you should have a substantial amount of retirement assets because you're looking forward to retirement. You're either 10, 15, 20 years from retirement, 25, even 30, but you should have some amount of retirement assets because you want to be able to retire at some point. So a lot of financial experts talk about, what's the dollar amount, kind of a financial health check of what I should have. And the consensus is kind of around 3 to 4 times your salary. But I don't really like this answer because is it really accurate, especially when you're starting to scale up in your career, your salary's changing, all these different factors. Well, let's look at just, keeping that 10 to 15% of your income, just consistently doing it throughout income increases, and see where that kind of lays out. Another thing is you're going to want to create a bigger emergency fund. Like I said, your expenses are most likely going to be much larger than they were in your 20s or 30s. So being able to have 3 to 6 months of living expenses kind of nested away in some sort of savings account, whether it's getting a little bit of interest or, in a high interest savings account getting a bit more, but having that kind of fallback where if something were to happen that you're able to lean back on that and to use it because it's cashable. And then finally, what is your debt reduction plan? What is the amount of debt that you have? Hopefully there's no bad debt, but your mortgage, your other debts, what is the amount you have and when is it projected to be paid off? Is it looking to be paid off before you hit retirement? Is it after retirement? Or are you actually holding it until way later in retirement in your 80s where you might not actually want to have debt at all? But having a plan and being able to work towards that and see whether it makes sense to pay it off sooner or later is very important, so you understand what is going on within your financial plan. So we're going to hop into just a simple spreadsheet to show you an easy example, and then we're going to hop into our actual planning software, and then I'm going to give you some recommendations for saving in your 40s. So by looking at this simple example, we're just going to look at a client that is 40 years old, making $75,000 a year, and has around 3 times their salary saved in retirement accounts, so around $225,000 in their retirement accounts. They're going to be looking to put around 15% of their income, so $11,250 away into their accounts each year. And over a 20-year period, so they're currently 40, they're going to want to retire around 60, 20 years from now, what are their accounts going to be at? And then what are they going to be able to spend in retirement? And we're going to be assuming a 6% rate of return just annually, just to be relatively conservative with this. But the value at retirement, the entire value of it is $1.13 million. And so with that in mind, that gives you about an annual spending amount, if you were to live until 95, of $78,000 in future dollars. Now that's not really fair to look at because that's still 20 years out the road. So when we adjust that for inflation, looking at around 2% and hunkering that back to today's dollars, that's around $52,000 of spending. And then obviously throughout the 35 years, inflation is going to slowly erode that. You're not actually going to be having that nominal amount. But this is just an easy example to see, what happens if I put 15% of my paycheck, I have 3 times my salary, I'm on par with all these things. What does that kind of give you? Now, this is great. This is a great health check to kind of look at, and it's fairly easy calculation to figure out. But this is not most of you. Most of you have a different scenario. So with that in mind, most of you won't have this sort of scenario, and I want to urge you, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. For some of you, it might work. For some of you, it might not work at all. Make sure to talk to your financial planner or advisor to figure out what is best for you. Everyone's different. Everyone's plan is unique. So make sure to figure that out. Now we're going to hop into our planning software and dive a bit deeper into a couple and what that kind of looks like from their end. Alright, so you've seen Mr. and Mrs. Young in a previous video of saving in your 30s. And so we're just going to build off this and look at, they're in their 44th year. They're looking at retirement in their 60s and they're making around $135,000 and $80,000, so around $200,000 in combined household income. Now, they haven't done that good at saving. They haven't had 3 times their salary. They kind of, missed the park with this a little bit. But they're able to save something. And that's honestly what I urge you guys to do. As long as you have something, there's always a need to eventually save a bit later in life. But to have something is better than nothing. So both Mr. and Mrs. Young have $20,000 in their TFSA, so $40,000. And then $40,000 in RSP, so $80,000. And they're starting to build a little bit of an emergency fund. But with that in mind, Mr. Young's income is $135,000 and it's increasing with inflation. With that in mind, they're looking at saving around 10% of their income. So most of this is going to be coming from Mr. Young's side, just from tax planning, it makes the most sense. But a portion of it is going to be going to spousal RSP and then a portion to the RSP. Kind of splitting that up so that in retirement, they have equal accounts, they're able to have optimal tax efficiency, it makes the most sense. And then they're also trying to build up their emergency fund as well. And any extra money within the plan is going to be going into their tax-free savings account because they want to grow that for more flexibility down the road. So they're saving about 10% of their overall household income towards retirement. And with that in mind, they're spending around $102,000 in their first couple of years, And then if you look at junior, who is their son, who's going into post-secondary, will actually start withdrawing from his RESP 2 years later. So 2 years from now, they're looking, they're empty nesters, they're looking to hunker down and save a bit more aggressively. And that's why in the first 2 years, they're kind of keeping up to what they need. And then later in life, they're starting to save a bit more into their tax-free savings account. And hopefully for some of you, this might be the case. Kids are coming out of the house, your expenses are dropping a bit lower. Have that discipline to not spend more, but to save more and to really project yourself into retirement. So $100,000 throughout the plan, and then at age 60, they're gonna look at what can I actually spend throughout retirement. And I did a little bit of tax planning here, a little bit of CPP planning, RSP meltdown, all that kind of stuff. We're not gonna focus on today, but kind of looking at how much income can they have. And we use a little bit of a laddered approach of $84,000 for the first kind of go-go phase of retirement till 75, so 60 till 75, 15 years, drop it down to 72,000, and you'll see there's this shortfall that they can't actually spend that amount throughout retirement. Ideally, if you wanted to look at, okay, what can they spend from 61 onward, the amount that they're going to be able to actually spend is going to be around $74,619. That's from 61 to 95. But with this shortfall, it makes it a bit difficult. Maybe they're not meeting their spending goals. Maybe they want to spend a bit more on traveling later. But there is this real estate, their townhome that they purchased that they've been holding on, and it has grown in value over time. So looking at, okay, well, if we have this real estate and maybe at some point we want to downsize, what is the amount that we need to downsize by, or should we downsize potentially a little bit smaller in order to meet our goals? And this is with the 84,000, 72,000 down to 60,000 later of life. Now keep in mind, this is real dollars adjusted for inflation after debt payments. So when looking at downsizing, we're looking at Mr. and Mrs. Young downsizing around 75. You can see that their real estate drops from 2.1 to 1.8. So realistically opening up $300,000 of equity to fund the remaining of their retirement. And with that in mind, I mean, the purchase price of $1.8 million projected from this future is around $1 million in today's dollars, which is not honestly a bad situation to have. You could buy a fairly nice, condo in the Lower Mainland or even Toronto area at that price. But with that in mind, they're still meeting their spending goals. They're able to have that savings. So with that example, I mean, there's no right or wrong way to plan for retirement, especially saving your 40s. You're still 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 years away from retirement, but to have a general idea, and as you get closer to retirement, you're starting to narrow down and pinpoint what your income needs are, what you want to spend, how much vacations you want to do, how much saving is necessary once the kids are out of the house or the mortgage is paid off and all this. It really comes into play, and you should be talking to a financial planner or advisor on an annual basis to figure this out and what meets your needs. The biggest thing is being able to flex your plan in order to meet your needs, whether that's selling your real estate or maybe potentially working a bit longer or saving a bit more aggressively. But understanding your goals and your needs is very important. So make sure to consult your financial advisor or financial planner to figure that out.